I'd like to introduce you to David Weinberger. David, you can come up, please, on the stage. David, welcome. How are you doing?
Okay so far.
I should get you a mic. Oh, you're behind the podium. Let's go there together. So, how do you feel?
I'm just fine, thank you.
All right. So, David, we're so thrilled that you're going to address us here. And just I should just shut up and listen to you. So, please, have us think about the future.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've already misturned the slide, so I'm off to an excellent start. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to give an old-fashioned talk because that's what Loic asked me to do. So, the information age has been formative of our basic idea of who we are as individuals and as people together, and especially when it comes to how we're together, it's also been formative of our idea of what leadership is. And so now that the age of information is coming to a close, it's a good time to look at what the idea of information has done to our idea of leadership. What does it mean to be a leader in the age of information? So when I say that the age of information is coming to an end, I don't mean there won't be any more information. I just want to be clear. The Stone Age ended, but there's still stone. And at the end of the information age, there's still information. We need information, and we will always have it. But the way that it's affected our view of the world will change. So for the past few decades, for a couple of generations, we've been driving down. Okay, so there's a set of slides that you're not seeing, but I am, and they're lovely. So, is there a possibility of getting the slides up? See, I told you they were lovely. Thank you. So for the past generation or so, a couple generations, we've been driving down this stack, the stack of significance, so that we're really, really good at managing bits and information, which is very important. We're really good at that. The whole idea behind information has been from the beginning that you reduce what you know in order to make it manageable, and you standardize it so machines can process it. And this works very, very well, but from the very beginning it's made us nervous because we knew from the beginning of the computer age, of the beginning of the information age, everybody knew that of course, we know more about our coworkers than the information system does, and we know all of the little quirks and peculiarities, exactly the sort of stuff that does not get put into the information system. But it's that stuff, the peculiarities and the quirks, that make the person our friend. It's what we know and care about the person for. So in the information view, all that gets stripped out, and the person becomes really, really boring. We're okay with that. We know how it works. We understand why we're doing it. We do it so that we can machine process information. Databases are hugely important. I'm not arguing against databases. There's tremendous utility in doing this, but it's also important to recognize that in the information age, we've been required by information to throw out most of the information. We just have to throw it out because we can only manage and control a very limited slice of it. And that's fine. That's the price that we pay, and we all know that. But in the age of the web, this person looks like this, whether it's MySpace or Facebook or whatever. But on her social networking page, there's lots of information about her. But more important, there are links all over the place. Everything is connected to everything else. Off her page, onto other people's pages, off of the site itself. Each of these links carries rich information. They're created without control or centralized coordination. They each add to what we know. This is a much, much richer view of the person than we got during the age of information. In fact, it's, I think, no exaggeration to say that hyperlinks are the opposite of information. That where information cuts things up and separates and reduces, hyperlinks join things, they connect things. They're quite literally, they connect things in rich, ambiguous ways. They increase the contextualization, they're uncontrolled. Hyperlinks are the opposite of information, which is why the age of information is coming to a close. So we've been going up the stack, down the stack. Now we've been going up the stack of increasing understanding and increasing social connection. The result of this architecture of links is abundance. You know, it's an abundance of good stuff. It's also, however, of course, an abundance of crap. Well, that's okay. We're actually very good at managing the crap. We're good at that. We know how to do it. We manage our spams. We manage our pornography filters. We know how to deal with the abundance of crap. It's the abundance of the good that is really throwing our culture for a loop. So many good ideas, so much good content, good people working together on good projects. Our culture just isn't ready for that. Our institutions are not ready for that. We don't know how to deal with it. Simply the amount of good content is overturning the entire media infrastructure. And the ability to find good people, get them working together well on good projects, this is overturning our sense, our nature, the nature of traditional leadership. In part, this is because leadership has been based upon scarcity. So I'm going to use as my example Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric, who in the United States is taken as the absolute avatar, the paragon of leadership. It's Jack Welch. Jack Welch is the leader, so can't go wrong taking him as an example. Jack Welch, great leader, great business leader. He's one in a million. He's one in many million. Leadership itself is scarce. By definition, most people are followers. Leadership is based upon this notion of scarcity. And while the leader, the traditional leader, has access to all of the information in an organization, an abundance of information, the leader leads to a large degree by restricting our access to that information, by keeping information scarce for the rest of us. That's how it's structured. That leadership, the leader's relationship to followers is often characterized by an imposed artificial scarcity of information. That's the way it has traditionally worked. And while the leader is of course overwhelmed with information, there's so much the leader has to process, leaders have, and we as well, have thought about the process of leading and of making decisions in computer terms, in information-based terms, where we say, well, we get together information, and good information leads to good decisions. This is, in the computer world, it's garbage in, garbage out, GIGO, as we say in America. And the idea is that if you have bad inputs, of course, you get bad outputs. That's just the way it has to work. And that's been the model of leadership. But that's an information-based model of leadership. And it's true enough for computers, but it's exactly wrong for how humans make decisions. We make decisions in the entirely opposite way. So that, yes, we have all of these inputs, just as the computer might. But in making the decision, we are deciding which of the inputs we're going to count. So we say that this report is not worth reading, but that one is, and this lawyer's opinion is too risk-averse, so we won't pay attention to her, but we will pay attention to this person. The process of making a decision is exactly the opposite of how computers work. It's exactly the opposite of the model that we've given ourselves. The model says inputs cause a good decision. The reality is that humans decide which of the inputs they're going to count. The inputs do not themselves have causality. And our idea about how leaders make decisions based on information gets it exactly backwards. There's one more scarcity of leadership, which is the scarcity of people. So in English, the cliche is that it's lonely at the top. And it is lonely at the top. We treat this as if it's a type of heroism, the lonely leader who looks out by, and usually it's a him, by himself and has the entire weight of the pyramid upon his broad, strong shoulders. That is a lonely job. It's a horrible job. It's a terrible way of thinking about this. We've taken what is a structural flaw in the system, that it rests so much on a single person. We've taken this structural flaw and we've treated it as if it's heroism. We drop our leaders down this long, lonely well of aloneness, and we act as if this is something positive, this type of isolation. It's horrible personally, and it's a terrible way to try to find your way through a difficult process, to rely upon one isolated heroic figure. It's terrible. So what happens to leadership when we embrace the abundance that we've created for ourselves? Well, so these are some of the terms that the things that leaders do. They decide, they communicate, they have vision and strategy, they coordinate, they're accountable. I meet CEOs sometimes and I'm amazed at how much they do, that they're great product people and they're also great at talking to the financial community and much, much more. It's just not natural that any one person can do all those things. And in fact, no one person can really do all of the job that we expect a leader to do. It's just too much to demand. Well, it's different when you start with a structure that doesn't demand that leadership be based on scarcity. If you assume there are lots of good, smart people who can do lots of things in your network, then just naturally leaders emerge. But the jobs of leadership get disaggregated. It's not one person who does all of this, but there's one person over here, say in the open source community, who's a really good person for coming up with ideas, and this person is a great communicator, and this person is a wonderful coordinator of activities, and this one has, and so forth. The job of the leader gets distributed across the network, which is a much better way of doing things. It's insane to think that any one person could do all those jobs, but that's exactly what we thought during the age of information, during the age of scarcity. And in an environment like that, in an open network environment, decisions only reach the top when the community cannot decide on its own. This is exactly the opposite of how, say, Jack Welch works. Jack Welch takes great pride that he is the decider. He is the one who makes the decisions, and the decisions then roll down through the organization and it reforms around his mighty will. Okay, fine. But it's not the way, say, that Jimmy Wales is the leader of Wikipedia. Wales only gets a decision when some issue is so hotly contested that the community cannot resolve it. He only gets to make decisions when the real system breaks, doesn't work. And then it goes to the leader, and it goes to the leader because the two sides are so evenly divided. And so the leader basically is doing what a coin toss would do, coming up with a solution to a problem. The putting decisions at the top is a sign of the failure of the networked, the abundant network environments that we're in. Likewise, strategy. In a traditional leader sets strategy. Well, this is the strategy that Linus Torvalds set when he started the Linux project. He sent an email. It was this. This was the strategy, and this is completely appropriate. The problem is that strategy tries to turn the future into something scarce, as if to say there is one future and we will reach it. Well, the fact is that that's the past. The past is the thing that there's only one of and can't be changed. The future is the thing there's an indefinite number of. So strategy actually frequently is an attempt to treat the future as something scarce. And as we've learned on the internet, flexibility and responsiveness is often a far better strategy than actually having a strategy. So you take a look at the big collaborative projects, whether it's Wikipedia or it's Linux or it's the web itself, and you ask how realistic, because that's another characteristic of traditional leaders, is that they're realistic. They're not dreamers. Oh no, they're tied to the real. They're realists. Realists would never, ever have built Wikipedia. They would not have built Linux. They would not have built the web. Those were not realistic ideas. Realism is overrated. Realism simply isn't ambitious enough. And this is something that we learn everybody knows looking at the web. What this means is that when it comes to the properties of leadership, whether it's making decisions or pulling together all of these roles or emergent strategy, it's no surprise that leadership in a networked world is a property not of an individual, but it's a property of the network. What we need are networks that themselves have the properties that we used to hope for in a single heroic leader. So I want to look quickly at what this might mean for governance, for example. Because in America, we're in this very interesting position an ironic position of having a really strong, decisive leader of the traditional sort. This is the first time in 8 years I've been to Europe where I didn't have to begin with an apology. So I'm very happy that this has happened. So here we are in this age, the transitional period of the net, and we have this strong traditional leader, but what's fascinating to me is that this is a strong traditional leader who fully understands the importance of and the nature of the network itself and his strength. Much of his strength has come from this understanding of the network, this being embedded in the network. You could see this in his campaign. This is Obama's campaign, where they had a social networking site where users, supporters could connect with one another and communicate up to the campaign itself. You can see this in the very first thing that the campaign did after the election was to put up a transition website, change.gov. It is not a great site, but it's getting better, which is already a sign of the Obama team's understanding of how the internet works. You put it up, it's not perfect, because who is? And then you fix it, and you make it a little bit better every day, and that's exactly what they've been doing. So that process by itself has been thrilling to me to watch. It's a site at which we're encouraged to connect with one another, but also with the campaign. So I'm going to make something up. I want to be very clear. I'm going to make up a social network. Let's assume that the Obama administration wants to have a social network for citizens. And I have absolutely no insight into what they're doing, so I am just completely making stuff up here as an example. And so they decide to set up a social network, and it's going to have, we have 300 million citizens, so let's say it has to be able to handle 100 million citizens talking with one another. And so it's facing the fundamental problem that conversation and intimacy don't scale, which seems like a terrible problem, and it is, but it's also a problem that every large site on the planet has faced. This is a problem we've faced over and over again, and every site solves it one way or another. So since I'm making this up, I'm going to say, let's say they decide to approach this by combining approaches from, let's say, the Daily Kos, which is a very popular site, political site in the US, lots of bloggers, and with mechanisms by which certain posts and discussions can be moved up and be made more visible. And they combine that with some of the techniques from Facebook and MySpace and other social networks. Again, making this up. So here you would have, in this example, you would have potentially millions of little conversations, small conversations, and you'd have a mechanism by which some of the more interesting and important ones would move up, become more visible, more and more visible, lots of layers. And at some point, there are few enough, they've been filtered out through some reputational system, so that the government itself can start participating. They can notice that here's an interesting discussion, say, of global warming, and so somebody from the government jumps in, says, interesting, let's talk about this. So you have a public discussion. So making this up, I think, would be great if this happened, but we'll see. So in this example, let's say the person who has behind the global climate change discussion is somebody named Polar Sky 253, and she's now engaged in talking with the Obama government, with the administration, which is fantastic. The question is, who elected this person? Who elected Polar Sky? No one. She emerged from a reputational system on the basis of, well, who knows what, but the conversation was good, the community decided it was worth listening to. This is what Simon Willis has called, a phrase I like, Simon Willis has called reputational democracy. Not representational democracy, which continues, but reputational democracy. And of course, by the way, it will turn out that Polar Sky 253 is a 15-year-old girl somewhere. Just inevitably going to happen. So here we have an entirely new level of, a new structure of democracy, a new level of democracy. Did not exist before, and now it does. That's come out of a software implementation based upon a reputation system. And furthermore, that system, that reputation system, is highly dependent on very small choices that the developers make. We know that that's what happens in social networking systems. Little tiny choices can have very big effects. So let's say, did I mention I'm making all of this up? Let's say that one day the developers decide they're going to move from a 5-star system of rating to a simple thumbs up, thumbs down system. Very small change. It could have huge repercussions in which conversations emerge, on the social dynamics, whether polar sky 253 remains important or not, what happens to her reputation, the entire system could be changed in subtle but important ways by these small decisions made by software engineers. But what they are changing is a new level and structure of our democracy. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if it's done correctly in a network sort of way, so that it remains very sensitive to the needs of the users. But this is what it means to say, I think, that leadership is becoming a property of the network itself. So we're still going to have leaders, no question about that, just like we still have rocks and we're still going to have information. We're still going to have leaders. But it's impossible to predict what the new leadership will be, because there are so many forces at play, and it's not simply a matter of inventing something and getting funded or whatever. This is occurring in a real world with lots and lots of interests at play, contending interests. And in fact, these interests are some of the most powerful and some of the most entrenched in our culture. We're talking about what happens to leadership here. So there is simply no way of predicting what the outcome of this will be. This is a political struggle that we are engaged in. We're engaged in it at every level. We're engaged in it at work when we route around our boss. We're engaged in it in our local politics and in our national politics. We are engaged right now in this struggle over the nature of leadership. And because the powers are so strong and so entrenched, and there are generational issues as well, there is simply no way to get through it except by getting through it, by struggling through it. And what comes out of it, we cannot be predicted. Nobody here can predict what's going to happen in this power struggle. But ultimately, I think and I hope that the old style of leadership will be toppled from its mythic position. The leaders don't go away, but the notion that the leader is a mythical hero who comes in to save us, who is the one person capable of knowing all and moving us forward by him or herself, that idea is going to tumble, I believe. There are great leaders, but they are no longer the only leaders we need. They are no longer sufficient. They are too scarce. We need abundant leadership. We need it all over. And the only way we get that is if leadership becomes a property if it takes on the best properties of the best networks, becoming more about connectedness, and more human, more comfortable with the inevitability of our human limitations, which is to say that a leadership that embraces abundance embraces first and foremost the abundance of connection of each of us, to the way that we each overflow the old informational boundaries, the way in which we hyperlink beyond ourselves, the way in which we get our meaning as in a hyperlinked world not from our own internal meaning, but from how we're connected, who we're connected to, the nature of our connection as we overflow every limitation, as our abundance enables us to flood the riverbanks, which is to say that we need fewer leaders and we need more love. And so, yes, I did manage to end on the word love. I'm very, very happy about that. So, thank you very much.
Here, right now. Thank you, David. Wow. Thank you very much, David.